Well, it is now time for our weekly political segment, Texas Face Off. Joining me this morning is Ed Scruggs. He's a board member and spokesperson for Texas Gun Sense, and Matt Makoviak, chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. We thank you both for being with us today. Obviously, when we see stories like that and we start to talk about this conversation about shootings, mass shootings, policy gets talked about. Matt, we're going to start with you. Thoughts about what steps lawmakers could take, and maybe before we even go there, what they should be looking at and thinking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all want to prevent these kinds of things from happening. I think no one wants to see these kinds of things happen with increasing frequency. So the first step is to understand exactly how this happened and why it happened. And so you can't pass a law within 24 hours of one of these horrific shootings without first studying exactly what happened. You know, it would be important to learn, first of all, were guns lawfully acquired in both the El Paso situation and in the Dayton situation. One of the challenges we have in these situations is in many cases, mass shooters don't break a law until they commit a mass shooting. Doesn't mean there may not be signals. In the Dayton circumstance, that person was kicked out of school for having a kill list, talking about raping women. Would seem to me that would be the kind of situation that should prevent someone from being able to lawfully own a gun. So I think part of this is we have to study exactly what happened in the Charleston church shooter a few years ago. We learned that the background check system was broken, that he shouldn't have been able to lawfully acquire a gun through the background check. Bipartisan lawmakers came together, passed the Fix Nix Act to make sure that never happens again. It's a good example of studying what happened, being thoughtful, trying to approach it in a bipartisan way, and passing something that makes sense. Yeah.
Ed, what are your thoughts on what lawmakers should be considering right now?
Well, I think everything should be on the table. I mean, to recognize that we just had a terrorist act, a race-based massacre of Latino people in this state is horrifying. I think we're going to see some movement. This morning, the GOP governor of Ohio, DeWine, called for that legislature to enact universal background checks and a red flag bill. These are things that legislature has refused to do, he is a strong Republican leader in that state. So for him to come out and make that call this early is promising. I would hope we could see something like that in Texas. It remains to be seen. The governor hasn't said much about this yet. But I think that's the least we can do. Both of those measures would help. It's not going to completely solve the problem, however, but it's a good start.
So let's talk a little bit about red flag laws. This is the idea that when someone presents what is believed to be a credible threat, they would go before a judge. The judge would be able to temporarily stop them from having a gun. They can confiscate a gun, stop them from purchasing a gun. Texas talked about this after the shooting at Santa Fe High School. This was one of the topics brought up during the roundtable discussions. Governor Greg Abbott kind of initiated this, but then backed off of it, and we had Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick come out and say the Senate's not going there. We're not going to pass this. Matt, what was the thought process behind Patrick coming out and being against them?
Yeah, from my memory, I mean, my understanding is that it has to do with due process concerns. And obviously, if you do have a chance to get in front of a judge, and there are some due process concerns, due process rights there. I think the question is, you know, what is the threshold for when you can no longer exercise a constitutional right? I do think you're going to see some movement towards red flag laws at the federal level. We've seen Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Democrat Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut apparently struck a deal in the last 24 hours that they're going to try to move forward with red flag laws. Can I just for a second talk about universal background checks? It's a bit of a bumper sticker, and I think it polls well. The problem with universal background checks is a couple things. One, the vast majority of gun acquisitions happen through background checks. Even at gun shows, there's a misunderstanding about how gun shows work. If a licensed dealer is selling a gun at a gun show, you still have to go through a background check. The only types of gun purchases that are not covered by background checks are so-called private sales that might occur between a grandfather passing a gun down to a grandson or something like that. In order to have universal background checks in private sale situations, you have to have a national gun registry. And I think for a lot of Second Amendment supporters, they hear National Gun Registry, they think gun confiscation. You start going down that road, and it's very concerning. So one of the things I would say to gun control advocates is, has there been a recent instance, even one instance, where someone has acquired a gun without going through a background check? The answer, as far as I know, is no. So that's not what's causing these mass shootings. It's not that someone went outside the system, went through a private sale, didn't have a background check, and then did a mass shooting.
Yeah, what would you say to that?
Well, I'd say it's a little more substantial than that in terms of, obviously, universal background checks may not stop gun violence, obviously. I could get online right now, I could go on Craigslist, I could go on a few sites, and probably within a few hours I could meet someone at the Walmart parking lot and I could buy an AR-15. I guarantee you I could do it. And there are people that do it. The shooter up in Dallas that killed 5 police officers, he had done that. He didn't do that with a weapon he used in that attack. So it is possible, but it's also, I think, these guns obtained bypassing the background check system, a lot of street crimes and other crimes that may not be as high profile. The weapons are either stolen or they're obtained illegally, and that's a big problem as well. So the universal background check system, while it does have flaws, it could be strengthened and fixed even more than it is today. I think it's just a layer of protection there that's a good start. Again, it does poll well because most people have nothing to fear, nothing to hide about it. They don't see a problem there. And I think the U.S. Senate must vote on this. The House passed it. It's sitting there. If the senators don't like it and they want to vote against it, cast the vote against it. But at least let's have a vote. It shouldn't be sitting there, especially now.
But we have a president who has said twice now that he would veto that type of thing. And again, because there is logic or there's an argument that it's not going to stop it whenever these guns are obtained. I mean, what do you say to the president who says, you can pass it if you want, but I'm going to veto it?
Well, politics is about accountability, and you're accountable for your votes or your vetoes or when you sign legislation. Universal background checks would not stop all gun violence, but it will stop some. All of these laws will save some lives. Right? What we're doing now is not working. It is spinning out of control and getting worse. So I would ask the president to please reconsider. In the past he said he supported them, but not now. But let's get the vote in the Senate and have elected officials be accountable by registering their vote on this legislation. I don't see there's any harm in that. It's got to be good in moving the ball forward.
Matt, if people poll-wise say they want it, why not just do it?
Well, I don't think you're going to see the Senate take votes on issues that the president would veto. I think that's pointless and actually counterproductive. That's why I think the Graham-Blumenthal effort on red flag laws, because the president again endorsed that in his statement yesterday morning, I think that has greater potential. I'll make a couple other quick points. One, I mean, he mentioned gun theft and illegal purchases. Those are already laws on the books. We don't necessarily need new laws. I do think one of the big issues here is, are we enforcing current law? I mean, Democrats oftentimes always want to talk about new laws. They won't oftentimes talk about whether the laws we have are being appropriately enforced. I think the other issue that oftentimes gets missed among gun control advocates is, let's say you did everything that they're proposing. You have 300 million guns in the country. You have 5 to 10 million AR-15s, 5 to 10 million AK-47s currently in circulation. What do you do about those guns? You're going to create a black market for those guns. Do you do a voluntary buyback? Criminals are not going to offer their weapons in a voluntary buyback. Do you do a mandatory buyback? What happens if someone doesn't return the gun? Are you going to go in and confiscate the gun? I mean, these are the second and third order questions that come up when these ideas are put out there in sort of a simplistic way.
Here, I wish we could talk about this all day. My producer is yelling at me in my ear like, you have got to wrap. So we thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much.
For our viewers who missed this, you can rewatch this interview on our website, KVUE.com, right after the news.